Hey everyone, Opendoor technology performed well again on Friday. And if you saw my video from Thursday, you know that the resistance was there and we went up a lot and then we came down because the resistance that I told you about was going to be resistance around the $8 area, and that's where we went to and we came down. But still, overall, a very good day because here on the 1 hour chart, this is how the day looked on Friday. We opened up around $7.07, went to $7.67. Really fast, right? And then we kept going up. But once we reached that resistance that I told you about, it started to come down some because that's resistance. That's where people are starting to take profit at, around the $8 area. But overall, we did good because I said Friday, hopefully we break the $7 area, right? And we did. I was hoping for a $7 break on Friday or sometime next week. And we broke it early. We broke it on $7. And on Thursday, I didn't know it was going to go $7. I didn't know. But after hours, you saw it broke it. And then it held after hours and pre-market. And then the next day, it did more than hold that $7. It went close to $8. Almost broke it. $7.92. But once it hit $7.92, profit taking started to happen. And a few reasons why Opendoor is going up. The last video I told you about that institutional investors are going to get a ban, but Opendoor should not be affiliated with that. And the CEO also confirmed that as well. Also, we have the news here about mortgage bonds. President Donald Trump announces on social media that he is directing the federal government to purchase $200 billion in mortgage bonds using cash reserves held by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So that's also good for the housing stocks. And on another note, if you look at all the factors that made rates incredibly low from 2020 through 2022, a large influencer was that the Fed was buying mortgage-backed securities. Executive Vice President of National Sales at Rate.com says, when lenders know there's an end buyer lined up, they can offer lower mortgage rates. So this news and the news about Opendoor not being affiliated as a large institutional buyer brought Opendoor up. And every housing stock that was not affiliated with the ban also went up Thursday and Friday. And we're going to take a look at that right now. On January 6th, Opendoor was doing fine. When the ban news came out, a lot of panic selling because no one knew what the news was all about. And then it recovered the next day. And then the day after that, it really recovered much higher than it was previous days because Opendoor was doing fine right here. We had a nice uptrend. Then this news came out and it made it come down. And where Opendoor was at on January 6th was right here at the $7 area. If this news never happened, Opendoor probably would just kept trending up to where we're at right now, to $7.30, $7.90. But it was halted right here on that uptrend because that news came out. So it's now where it should be, around the $7.50, $7.90 area. The high was $7.92, but right now, after hours, we're at $7.31. Now let's look at lennar. I told you before, if housing stocks are doing well, lennar is definitely going to do well. And Warren Buffett bought lennar around the low 100s, and the stock is starting to do well again. It was at $102, and lennar had a very strong day, Thursday and Friday. It never went down because there was no profit taking. Opendoor had profit taking right here, and that's why it went down on Friday. Lennar, no profit taking, so it just kept on going up. After hours, it's still holding strong. Even OPAD it pumped up as well. OPAD was at $1.57, and now the high for OPAD recently was $2.67 right here. And the high for OPAD is $2.67. After hours, $2.07. But remember, OPAD is not like Opendoor. It's more of a pump stock, and when OPAD goes up, it pumps like this. It goes to 150 to 275, and then it'll come down pretty fast. It'll hold sometimes, but it's kind of risky buying OPAD. As you can see, back in August, it went from $1.25 all the way to $6.35. And then from there, it went all the way back down to $1.50 again. So that's not really, a good move on OPAD because it started from here at 115 area. And then after the pump, it went back down to the 115 again. So that's pretty much a pump and dump right there. But people will buy OPAD every once in a while to get some quick cash and in and out kind of transaction. But if you want a long hold stock, look for credible stocks, credible companies like Opendoor, Lennar, Zillow, Rocket Mortgage. Those are credible housing stocks, and there's a few more out there, but those are the ones I've been looking at recently. All right, so now let's look at the resistance and support, and these are the ones I drew on Thursday. I didn't make a video on Friday, so these are still here from Thursday, and the resistance and support pretty much lived up to where I put them at, because I drew a resistance at 787 and Opendoor went to 792. Almost there, pretty close to a nice prediction where I thought it was going to go and come down at, right? And this is how I look on a 5-minute chart. I had a $7 support here, and we held it pre-market and after hours, and then it went up. Then I had another resistance at 741. Once we broke that 741, that was confirmation that Opendoor was going to keep going up, because we broke it and we didn't come back down. And this is what I mean by it didn't come back down. Once we broke 741, we went up to 772. That was our chance to go back down to 741, but it didn't. It held support right here at the 766 area, and then it went up to test the next resistance at the 787, where I put it at. But it broke it a little bit and went to 792, but it couldn't hold it, and then it went below my resistance that I put, 787. Then it went back to the previous resistance, because resistance can also be support. So this line I wrote at 766 was a resistance at 1030. It broke it, right? And then it came down back to that 766. But now, since we're at 12:55 or 1 p.m., that resistance that I drew on 1030 is now a support. So it went to that 766 as a support, and then it broke that support. And once it broke that support, it went down to that 741 resistance that I drew at 1030. But now it's a support, because now it's 235 now. It didn't hold that support either. So it went down to 724. It held that $7 support. It didn't go nowhere near that $7 support. So we're good. So we probably could move it up a little bit to support that $7 to maybe 720 now, or to 720. And we'll leave the other lines there, because we're going to need to break these resistance in the future. So we'll keep that there as a reference for where we need to break, because if we do this resistance here and on Thursday, then we also need to break it again. You know, these are going to be resistance now, because we couldn't hold it before. So now they're a resistance once again. But we did not drop back to $7, so that's good. And the support now is $7.20 instead of $7. So we got to hold at $7.20 on Monday. And if it dips below $7.20, let's come back up right away, because if it goes below $7.20 and stays below $7.20, then we have a risk of going down to $7. So Monday, Tuesday, we want to make sure we hold $7.20 and then try to break that $7.41, at $7.66, and then at $7.87. If we can trade somewhere between $7.41 and $7.87, that's going to be bullish for Opendoor if we can trade in this area. We don't really want to trade in this area because, you know, it's very close to $7.20 and $7. So we want to trade between $7.41, $7.87. If we can do that, that's bullish. Very bullish for Opendoor if we can trade in this area right here. So those are going to be the short-term resistance and support. So let's look at the daily and the weekly on where we can go further or downward if it goes lower for profit taking or consolidation or whatever reason, I don't know. But for the long trend for Opendoor, what we need to hold for support to make sure we don't go back down into the dungeons again, back to $5.64 or $6, we need to make sure we hold $6.65. That's going to be an area we need to hold if something happens, like some kind of bad news or it dips for some reason. I don't know. Any kind of bad news, we got to make sure we hold $6.65. And now if we start to go higher, good news, I don't really need to draw resistance because the one I drew from Thursday is still actually there, the 861. So that's going to be the main resistance we need to break for Opendoor, 861, and we don't want to drop below $6.65. That's what we need for Opendoor. That's pretty much a summary of how Opendoor is technically and chart-wise. Not too much news out right now for Opendoor, but that's okay because we had a lot of news during the week. My opinion for Opendoor is that Opendoor is, a great stock, but we still have to wait for more catalysts from the company, more news about what's going to happen in 2 weeks. Trump said he's going to announce something in 2 weeks that's going to help homeowners, home buyers. So we're going to wait for that in 2 weeks. And then, if everything goes well, I think Opendoor should look good for the long term for this year. Everything is starting to set up for a good housing market for 2026. Everything is setting up for it, but we have to make sure everything happens. We got to make sure everything lives out to what's promised, right? So 2026, once again, should be the year for housing stocks. That's my opinion. And everything that we're talking about now in the news, those are all catalysts for 2026, maybe early 2027. So for sure, if there's going to be a good market for houses, 2026, early 2027 is the timeline I'm looking at for housing stocks, because everything is shaping up very, very nice for housing stocks. We just got to see it happen. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like. See you next time.